Welcome back to the final section of Mastering Express Web Application Development. In this section, we're going to be taking a look at a few open source projects that are built on top of Express to see how people are using it in the real world. The first one that we're going to look at is ghost.org. Ghost is a Node.js and Express Power blogging engine. We're going to take a look at how the application is structured and what libraries they use. Ghost is an open source project with lots of contributors from all around the world, with varying levels of expertise. If you want to get involved in open source, Ghost is a good way to do it. First, let's clone the Ghost repo. As Ghost is open source, you can just clone it from GitHub onto your local machine. The first thing that I'm going to ask you to look at is how big the project is. To do that, I'm going to use a utility called clock. What this does is it counts the project and generates matrix. As we can see, this project is quite large, containing 39,000 lines of JavaScript at the time of publishing of this course, along with 1,600 lines of HTML and 4,500 lines of CSS. Let's compare that with our Instagram application to just get a sense of the scale of the project. Here, I say I want to exclude the Node modules directory because I don't care about all the code in there. I didn't have to do this in the Ghost directory as we haven't run npm install yet. Our Instagram application is considerably smaller, with only 280 lines of JavaScript, including the code that Express generated for us. Compared to Ghost's 39,000 lines of JavaScript, our application is tiny. Let's take a look at package.json. If we scroll down, we can see all the dependencies that Ghost has. As you can see, Express is one of the many dependencies. It also uses Express handlebars for templating. It also uses some other common Node.js modules such as Chalk for coloring the console output, Lodash, which is utility framework, Passport, which is used for user authentication, and Request, which is used for making HTTP requests. If we take a look at index.js, we can see that the start command on line 25. This tells us what the entry point into the application is. So, we see that Ghost returns Ghost server, and then we call start on Ghost server. So, here we see that Ghost is actually just a variable containing the exports of core/index.js. So let's take a look at that file. This is just a bootstrap script. If we scroll through this file and get to the bottom, we can see that it just exports an initialization function. What's interesting is this middleware function where it passes in the blog application and an admin application. Again, middleware just points to middleware/index.js. So let's take a look at that. In middleware/index.js, we start to see app.use. What this file does is registers middleware on the application. This is a concept that you should be familiar. Back to the core/index file. Let's take a look if we can see where our application is created. If we search for Express, we can see the initialization function that it creates two applications, one for the blog and one for the admin section. There's quite a lot going on and we don't have much time, but if you're interested, you can scroll through this file and see how the configuration is loaded and models are initialized, how templates are rendered, compression is set up, and how things like View Engine are configured for Express. Now, let's take a look at the important things in the project. The most interesting start with most applications is its routing. Ghost has 4 different router files. Let's start by taking a look at the front-end routes. At the top, we can see we require front-end, which is a collection of front-end controllers. We'll come back to this. If we scroll down, we can see that we have an index router, a tag router, an author router, and RSS router, and a private router. Initially, we set up a few routes such as log out, sign out, and sign up, and then we redirect to other URLs. These are done for historical purposes and backwards compatibility. If we keep scrolling down, say to RSS router, we see that we visit /RSS/ as a GET request. We'll execute the code in the front-end controller with the RSS function. Scrolling down, we see that if we get /, we'll execute code in the homepage function at the front end. Let's take a look at controller's front end to see what these routes are actually executing. Again, there's lots of setup done at the top of this file. If we jump to line 251, we find a large object that just contains handler functions, each of which has that familiar request, response, next signature that we're used to. Again, things aren't too easy to follow here, as the controllers are just responsible for calling commands that are required in and reformatting that data into the format required by the views. If we scroll down, we can see that a pre-post render event is fired, and then we render a post passing in the request and response object. Speaking of which, where are the views? Let's open index.html. This is the main template for our application. If we scroll down, we can see that it looks fairly similar to Nunjucks, but we are actually using a templating engine called Handlebars. Now, Ghost's interface isn't actually rendered by Express the majority of the time. This original page is. Then the application is an ember.js application. So, if I search for the team user view, we can see that the team user view is actually an Ember view declaration. What I actually need to search for is teamuser.handlebars, which contains the HTML function for this view. All of these views are fed using that Ghost API. So we can search for routes API and take a look at all of the available routes that are used. As I mentioned, Ghost is a fairly large project, so we can't cover all of it here. But if you're interested, I'd take a look at the Core Server Models folder and Core Server API to see how things work behind the scenes. The models and the API form the core of Ghost. Ghost is the first Node.js project that we've taken a look at, and it's a big one at that. It's the best example of a multi-collaborator Express codebase available today. So if you're looking for inspiration, it's definitely worth getting involved. In the next video, we'll take a look at balloons.io, a much smaller application that's a chat room built with Socket.io.